Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei was the hidden dragon leader? Part 8. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. The title says it all, everyone, here we go. Bremery Mansion. The day of the Youth Devil meeting has finally arrived and Issei Hyoudou prepared for it like he did most things in life. Issei, keep going. Female Kiba shouted. Don't forget about me, Issei Carleman purred as she stood next to the rutting pair taking a small break after her round with Issei. Even in the steamy shower it was hard to miss Issei's seed leaking from her pee. Of course not, but we really should get going, Issei replied, and he pulled the busty knight into his body as he continued to hammer Yumi from behind. You say that as though you didn't invite us to join you. Carleman smiled before she began making out with Issei. Considering how important the night was, you could think Issei would be a bit more professional. However, the night was going to be a long one, and Issei needed something to calm himself down beforehand. The shower would last around 20 more minutes, and Issei would make sure to fill each girl with plenty of his seed to hold him and them over as they dealt with the stupidity that was devil politics. At least he hoped so. There we go, Issei smiled as he finished putting on the final part of his outfit. Azazel suggested that Issei come up with something special for his political debut instead of his uniform, and although Issei hated it at first, Irina and Zenobia convinced him to do it both with sex and by agreeing to dress up as well. His outfit consisted of a medieval-looking navy blue tunic with red-orange trim, a brown belt around his waist, and large black boots with orange toe rings around the top of each boot. The cuffs of his long sleeves are black with orange zigzagging trim separating the cuff from the navy blue part of the sleeve. In addition, he wore a long flowing cape around his neck which is black on the outside and crimson red on the inside. Not bad, Issei. Irina smiled as she got a good look at her childhood friend's new outfit. As for Irina, she was in an all-black outfit consisting of a black top that showed an ample amount of cleavage, along with a long black V-neck coat that had fur on the cuffs and on the edge. A blue teardrop-like ornament completed the jacket which she had fastened so not nearly as much of her ample bust showed. The outfit was complete with a pair of black heels with a yellow stripe on each. Unlike usual, her hair was down, and it added to the beauty of the outfit. Same to you, Issei smiled before planting a kiss on his childhood friend's lips. What about me, Issei? Zenobia smiled as she stood in her outfit that, like Irina and Issei's, was custom made. Zenobia's outfit was a high-neck blue one-piece dress that extended to her thighs with dark blue gloves with black linings. Like Issei, she had a cape on which was black on the outside with a red interior, and a pair of yellow shoulder pads held it on. Zenobia is Claire completing the trio. Yeah, I went with Dragon Masters for them. You look great, Zenobia also, Issei smiled as he kissed the second girl also. So, I guess it's time to go see the others, Irina smiled. Yeah, and I'm very curious what they're going to wear. Issei smiled. And by they, you mean Valerie, Ingvild and Ria's right, Irina smirked. Yeah, Issei smiled shamelessly. Since we're on the subject, what is Valerie going to do with LeFay? Zenobia asked nervously. Most of the peerages were wearing their usual outfits which for LeFay meant her mage's uniform. The problem was that after Issei's freakout, Ria's didn't want to take that chance, even after he assured her that it was fine. Valerie has a plan. Issei deadpanned. Alright, Irina said nervously as they walked downstairs to join the rest of the group. You guys sure took your time. Akeno smiled as she was dressed in an all-black Maiko outfit tied together by a white obi with a bow on the back. Yeah, I can't believe we were dressed earlier than you. Yumi teased as she was dressed in Kuoh's female uniform with her breasts unbound, with Carleman choosing to wear the Kuoh uniform as well. We were getting worried about you guys. Ria smiled. Ria's was dressed in a crimson-red sleeveless dress that seemed designed to show off her massive breasts. Issei couldn't help but stare. Something Ria's no doubt hoped for when she picked the outfit. By us you mean Issei? Irina frowned, aware that the dress was chosen specifically to try to charm Issei. That's enough, Irina. So, where's Ingvild and Valerie's little group? Issei wondered, focusing on the rest of the group instead of Ria's. Here I am, Ingvild said bashfully as she walked into the room. Ingvild had exchanged her usual outfit for a dark purple strapless dress that flowed down to her knees and a pair of blue gloves, along with black stockings and a pair of heels. Beautiful, Issei smiled, appreciating just how lovely the Leviathan heiress was. Thank you, Ingvild blushed. I guess that leaves Valerie and her group, Irina said calmly. They're outside waiting with Azazel. Ria smirked as though she was hiding something. I take it, I'm supposed to go first. Issei replied as they looked towards the door. Yep, Ria chuckled as Issei opened the door knowing that Valerie was waiting. What took you so long, Issei? Valerie smiled as she stood in front of her peerage with a smile. Most of the group was in their normal outfits, except for LeFay who was in the Kuoh girl's uniform, but the highlight was Valerie. The White Dragon Empress was wearing a metallic blue V-neck backless dress that showed off her figure spectacularly. Her hair was even in a ponytail which let her truly shine. Wow, Issei said, unsure of what else to say. I was going for wow. Valerie smiled as she walked up to Issei and wrapped her arms around him. Save the flirting for later, boss. Biku teased. Oh, shut up, Biku. Valerie quickly yelled back before turning to Issei. Don't get used to this side, Issei. I figured this was a special occasion, so I did something different. Valerie blushed. Well, I like it. Issei smiled. Okay, now that Valerie is done showing off, I suppose I should tell you guys how we're getting to tonight's events. Azazel smirked from the side. Issei took the moment to leave Valerie's grasp, much to her disappointment. So we're not taking a carriage or something? Issei wondered. Nope. I called in an old friend to help take you. Azazel smiled before looking to the sky. Issei looked up and with his enhanced senses, managed to see a group of figures approaching. In front was a purple dragon that was 15 meters long. Trailing behind him were dragons that weren't as long as the first one and had various colors. You got Tannen and the dragons to take us, Drake spoke up in shock. Yeah. Tannen trained Valerie back in the day, so he knows her very well. I asked him if he could take us so we could show up in grand style. Azazel smiled and before long the dragons had landed. From the look of things there were 5 dragons alongside Tannen. No doubt the group would ride on the dragon of their choice. It's been some time, Azazel, and is that little Lucy I see? Tannen smiled. Geez, Tannen, I told you not to call me that. Valerie blushed slightly. Sorry, but I couldn't resist. You've become so beautiful, my dear. Tannen gushed. But grief. Valerie blushed yet again as Issei looked on in amusement. Greetings, Lord Tannen, I assume you and these dragons are our ride. Issei wondered. That's correct, boy. It seems Drake has taught you well. Tannen smiled, recognizing that Drake was Issei's host. He's a wonderful host when he can keep it in his pants. Drake deadpanned. Anyway, let's get going. Valerie, Riaz, Ingvild, you'll be riding with Tannen. The rest of you can choose who you want. Azazel chuckled. Sounds good. Issei smiled, ignoring the dig from his sacred gear. Riaz, Valerie and Ingvild along with their respective peerages walked towards the meeting hall where the youth devils would be gathering. Issei, Irina and Zenobia went to the main hall since they were technically dignitaries, but not before Issei planted a kiss on the lips of Valerie, Ingvild and even Riaz, which caused them to blush. So are you ready? Valerie, Riaz said calmly as she walked towards one of the large ballrooms with the white dragon empress at her side. They were going to meet up with Sona before going to the holding room for the youth devils, which suited her just fine. Yeah, so what do I have to look forward to? Valerie smirked, aware that Riaz was among the more peaceful devils out there. Riaz smiled bitterly before replying, well, Sakvara and my cousin Serg are good people, so there's that. You already know Sona, so you should be fine. What about the others? Valerie replied, choosing not to mention Diodora and Zephyrdor out loud, so they didn't bother her peerage. Zephyrdor's a troublemaker, but as for him, I don't know. Riaz admitted. She knew Diodora as a sweet guy, so what they told her was shocking. Hello, Riaz, Sona said with a smile, breaking Riaz from her musing. Sona chose a blue spaghetti strap dress that was thigh-high with a clear blue ribbon wrapped around her breasts. Next to her was Tsubaki, who wore a green short-sleeved dress that was also thigh-high with a blue ribbon around her waist. The contrast between Queen and King was staggering. Hello, Sona. You look lovely tonight. Riaz smiled, choosing to focus on the good part of the upcoming meeting. Thank you, so where's our friend the Red Dragon? Sona wondered. They're in the main hall talking with the other dignitaries, which leaves us to talk shop with our fellow youth devils, Riaz teased. I see. Sona said with a calm expression. Between Zephyrdor's shock victory and Diodora, this was going to be a very interesting meeting for them. Enough talk. Let's get going. Valerie smiled as the girls began walking towards the meeting room. The girls spoke about their training, but just as they were about to arrive at the holding area, there was a large explosion. I'll give you one guess on who caused that. Riaz smiled, looking toward Sona. Oh yeah, it's Zephyrdor. Sona frowned as they walked into the room. Sure enough, 2 people were arguing, and as Sona and Riaz suspected, with Zephyrdor Glaciolabolas arguing with Sakvara Gares. Sakvara was a beautiful girl in her late teens with olive skin, long green tint, blonde hair and pink eyes with a pair of glasses over it. Her outfit was a blue robe that was tame considering she was a devil. You're a creep, Zephyrdor. I can't believe Megumi lost to a scumbag like you. She was arguing with the new heir of the Glaciolabolas clan, Zephyrdor. He had red skin with blue hair and beady blue eyes, along with black magic tattoos all over with blue skin. His outfit consisted of a yellow jacket with black stripes that resembled a wasp's body with a red shirt and blue vest underneath black pants and pointed shoes. Well, she did, but that's her loss. The Glaciolabolas clan is being run by a real man now. Zephyrdor smirked. Where? Because all I see is a punk. Sakvara scowled. Let's take a walk and I'll show you how much of a man I can be. Zephyrdor cackled. This guy's a creep, Valerie said in disgust. She hated people like him and a part of her wanted to put him in his place. Yes, I agree, and I think it's time to teach him some manners. Arthur said calmly as he reached for his blade and moved towards Zephyrdor. At least it was his plan until Issei appeared out of nowhere and put his arm up. Allow me, Arthur. Issei smirked as he walked towards Zephyr. Alright, Arthur whispered, and Issei walked towards the group with a smile on his face. This should be good. Valerie smiled, choosing to enjoy the show to come instead of wondering why Issei was here and how he had beat them there. To think the devils had delinquents like you. I assumed a noble family would be well noble. Guess I was wrong. Issei smirked, causing Zephyr to twitch. What did you say? Zephyr yelled. Issei naturally ignored him and turned towards Sekvara. Issei Hyoudou, the current Red Dragon Emperor, at your service. I couldn't help but feel bad that such a lovely young lady had to deal with a loser like this guy, so I stepped in. I hope you don't mind. Why you? Zephyr yelled out in anger. I was doing just fine myself, but by all means, if you want to play White Knight, go ahead. Sekvara chuckled, very curious about what would happen next. But of course. Issei smiled before turning back towards Zephyr. I've got more manliness in my pinky than you do in your entire body. You wouldn't be showing her anything. Issei smiled, showing off his right pinky for emphasis. You bastard, Zephyr yelled before charging at Issei, aiming to punch him in the face. Issei smiled before blocking the punch with said pinky, which caused Zephyr to lose his balance. As I said. More in my pinky than you do in your whole body. Issei smirked before aiming a left hook right at Zephyr's exposed face, sending him flying into the wall. Whoa, Ria said in shock, not expecting Issei to use that much power. Incredible, Sona gasped. Issei could only smile as some people came over to Zephyr to pull him off the wall, while Issei focused back on Sekvara. Now where were we, milady? Issei smiled before turning towards Sekvara, who was stunned by the display. Do you happen to have a master red dragon? Sekvara asked curiously, causing a few twitches from the girls who knew him. Issei smiled himself. I don't, but I'm not interested in finding a master anyway. I just saw garbage and wanted to take out the trash. Honestly, I probably shouldn't have intervened, but I couldn't watch his pathetic display any longer. Issei smiled. I see. Sekvara frowned. I must be going though. Issei smirked before walking past Sekvara and whispering something in her ear, along with sneaking a kiss onto her cheek, something most of the room didn't notice outside of those watching Issei. But grief, Ria sighed, seeing Issei up to his old tricks again. It was any wonder he wasn't aiming for more women considering the ones already on his plate. It's how he is, Rias. We really shouldn't be shocked, Valerie groaned. I take it you know that guy, Rias? A voice said, catching Rias off guard. The voice belonged to a young man with purple hair and purple eyes, wearing a grey patterned sleeveless vest with a black long-sleeved shirt underneath black pants and sneakers. Yes, I do, Serg. He's a classmate of mine. Rias sighed. Care to introduce us, Rias? Valerie teased. Of course, Valerie, this is Serg Bale, my cousin. Rias replied calmly. A pleasure to meet you, Serg. I'd introduce myself now, but I'll save the surprise for later. Valerie replied. I see. Serg grinned. Well, I guess we should relax for now, since the fun seems to be over. Rias smiled bitterly. Yeah, Valerie added, knowing that the night was just getting started. The time came at last for the meeting to begin. The youth devils in their peerage in the front with Issei, Irina and Zenobia in the back of the stage alongside the Mayu and an elderly man with long grey hair, a matching beard and a gold and white monocle over his left eye. He was wearing a short blue robe with a gold lining on the top and bottom of the collar, the sleeves of the robe, and at the front of his robes, all the way down to the bottom of the robe. To think old man Odin was actually here. Valerie said in shock, noticing the man at last. Wait, by Odin do you mean Norse god Odin? Rias exclaimed. Yep, and that girl next to him is one of the Valkyries. You almost never see them outside of Asgard, so this is a treat. Valerie smiled. The girl next to the old man appeared to be in her teens with long silver hair and aqua eyes. She was wearing a light blue business suit, but Valerie knew she was a legendary warrior. They would have said more, but Serziches approached the podium wearing his Mayu outfit. Welcome everyone to this wonderful event. It's very rare that we can gather all the young devils together. You represent the pillars of our future, and with recent events that needed to be discussed, I felt that it was time to gather you together. Serziches announced. What events are those? Sekvara asked calmly. Serziches smiled. Since there are a few events in question, the first event is a happy occasion, while the second one is of a more serious nature. As you all know, Ajuka and I are two of three devils known as super devils. Devils whose power is far beyond that of even high-class devils. The third, who you may not be as familiar with, is a man named Rizavam Livan Lucifer, the descendant of the original Lucifer. Recently his granddaughter became a member of my sister's school in the human world, and we've managed to convince her to rejoin our ranks at last. You really mean me, but whatever. Issei thought to himself. So please let me welcome back to our ranks Valerie Lucifer and her peerage. Serziches announced happily before the room exploded with applause. This was Valerie's cue to walk up to the stage with Arthur Lefay and Biku by her side. For Valerie this was a moment she never imagined years ago, and she couldn't help but look at Issei and a smiling Azazel who clapped as she did. This was her moment and she was going to take it. Walking up on stage with the devil world watching, she couldn't help but smile as she took her place at the podium. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Lord Lucifer. Let me start by saying that my relationship with the Lucifer name is rather rocky, so I would feel more comfortable if you were to call me Lady White. By that name, Diodora wondered. Valerie had a few things to say to the young man, but kept those at bay, because it's related to why I haven't been a part of the devil world for many years. Valerie said calmly before focusing her magic as the white wings of her sacred gear appeared behind her to the shock and awe of the crowd watching. You see, I am the White Dragon Empress because of my human mother. My grandfather did not take it well, and to say he treated me poorly would be an understatement. Valerie smiled bitterly, needing to gather herself. So you're a half-breed, huh? I say you should have stayed hidden. Zephyr spoke up, causing a few people to look at him in disgust. Big talk for a guy who got beat by a flick of my finger. Kinda tough to disrespect humans when one owned your ugly mug. Issei spoke up. Better he did than risk the temperament of Valerie's peerage. You? Zephyr spat. Yes, me, and frankly it's behavior like yours that explains why Valerie left in the first place. Issei said boldly. Why you? Zephyr yelled. Issei, stay out of this. If Zephyr has an issue with me, that's fine, and I know a perfect way to resolve his issue. Valerie smiled viciously. What's that, bitch? Zephyr spat. How about you and I have a rating game, my peerage against yours? I don't know how you know about rating games, but sadly we can't do that. Zephyr frowned. Actually, you can face off in a rating game, Surziches revealed. What? Zephyr said in shock. I was going to announce this later, but given Valerie's suggestion, this seems like an appropriate time. There's a new threat to the peace we've achieved known as the Cows Brigade. It's a group that includes the old Mag faction that fought against us during the Devil Civil War and others who wish to plunge the world into war. Will we be forced to fight? Serg wondered. In truth, we don't wish for the younger generation to be forced to fight, but since war is never that simple, we deemed it necessary to prepare something. The rating games will allow you younger devils and your servants to get used to battle. Surziches revealed. Alright, Serg replied. Since you two seem so eager to face off with one another, you two will our first match 1 month from now. Sounds good to me. Zephyr smiled. I agree, Valerie replied. Excellent, Surziches smiled. After the introduction of the rating game tournament, Surziches spoke about a few more matters related to the peace treaty with the fallen angels and angels. But everyone was focused on the fact that the newest member of the Youth Devils would be facing off against the new heir of the Glacial Ebola's clan. What was already going to be an interesting night had become even more so thanks to that. But the night over, everyone returned to the Gremory mansion in order to relax, but for Valerie Lucifer the night was far from over. I messed up tonight, Kuroka. I shouldn't have challenged that guy. Valerie frowned as she and Kuroka sat on the bed with the Nekomata lying in her lap. Arthur might be her most loyal servant, but she spoke to Kuroka the most. Not at all. The fact that Issei saw fit to step in should tell you that this guy was out of line. Kuroka smiled. Yeah, and that's the problem. Valerie frowned. But that's Kuroka started to say before the door opened and Issei walked in. A penny for your thoughts, Valerie. Issei smiled. Get out of here, Issei, I'm not in the mood, especially after that stunt you pulled with Sikvera. Valerie pouted. Between getting involved with Zephyr and the kiss he planted on her cheek, Valerie was certain Issei was planning to add Sikvera to his collection. I think I'll leave you two alone. Kuroka smiled as she got up. Where are you going, Kuroka? Valerie said angrily. I'm gonna leave you two alone to chat since clearly you two need it. Kuroka smirked before leaving the room and shutting the door behind her. Now Issei and Valerie were alone and one of them wasn't in the mood. So, are you here to lecture me instead of Zaz? Valerie pouted. No, but I'm sure I can arrange a lecture if you want. Issei smirked. Valerie smiled. Yes, I am. Issei smiled before his expression changed. But that doesn't change the fact that you two were going to clash whether I interrupted or not. Your peerage was looking for an excuse to tear him apart. Issei smirked. Yes, and then you got involved in order to add another heiress to your growing collection. You have Mirias and Ingvald along with Irina Zinovia and your little harem in the Kendo Club, but that's not enough, is it? Valerie pouted. I can't help it. I'm a dragon who wants to conquer princesses. Issei smirked. And yet you barely do a thing to Mirias and Ingvald, despite us all being princesses. That kiss you gave us is nothing compared to what I'm sure you do with the Kendo Club every fucking day, Valerie exclaimed before blushing in realization of what she said. Issei smiled before walking over to the blushing Valerie, stopping a few feet away from her bed. I didn't have sex with Riaz for some time because I wanted her to realize that her actions had consequences and that I'm not just going to sleep with her because she's got some tits. It worked considering she actually asked why I slept with her at the beginning of the trip, Issei said happily. I see. Valerie frowned, reminded of the odd relationship between Riaz and Issei. Enough of this. Just sleep with her already. Drake shouted out, catching the two of them off guard. For once I agree with my rival. You two have needed to do this for a while and now's as good a time as anybody. Albion added. But what about Valerie, stammered, wanting to make an excuse for why she couldn't. Oh, spare me, Valerie. The only thing stopping both of you was that magician's curse. Now that you've figured that out, you two are just fine to sleep with each other. You want it, he wants it, just do it already. Albion yelled out. But Valerie shouted before Issei silenced her lips with a kiss. Valerie kissed back for a little bit before Issei pulled away. So Valerie, are we doing this or not? Issei smiled. He got his answer when Valerie slammed her lips against his. This was a long time coming, and Valerie was certainly going to enjoy it. Phew, that was something. Issei smiled as he lied in the bed with a naked Valerie next to him, their shared clothes tossed onto the floor and in surprisingly good shape. The pair went at it for close to 5 hours before stopping. They would have ended in half that time, but since Valerie decided to use her sacred gear to steal a little energy from a mostly exhausted Issei in order to continue their fun. Issei responded by activating his boosted gear, and things got heated up once again. You're telling me? I can barely move thanks to that tree you call a dick. Valerie panted, exhausted from the combination of her sacred gear's exertion and the pounding Issei gave her. Her body shined with an odd combination of sexual fluids and sweat from their incredible romp. That's on you. You tried to steal my energy using your damn sacred gear. And it was worth it because you used yours and made things really fun. Valerie replied, kissing him on the cheek. She didn't know what would happen if she brought their sacred gears in, but she didn't regret it. Well, it doesn't matter now. Neither of us are going anywhere tonight, so let's get some sleep. Issei chuckled. Fine, but don't be surprised if you get a rough wake-up call tomorrow. Valerie smirked. I'm okay with that. Issei smirked since the others loved to do that also. But Valerie replied before she shut her eyes and relaxed on Issei's chest. It was a crazy day. But it was worth it in the end. Night, Valerie. Issei smirked before doing the same. Did he have to sleep with Valerie tonight? No, but Valerie was looking forward to the day. Would he make a habit of sleeping with her? Probably not, but considering that today went as planned, he wasn't going to complain too much. Partner, are you sure this was wise? Drake spoke into his head. You mean sleeping with Valerie, so she didn't have a chance to really think about why I pulled that elaborate stunt tonight? Well, that remains to be seen, Issei replied mentally. The reason he really got involved with Zephyr wasn't because of Sakura per se. He was trying to figure out if there were other traitors amongst the youth devils besides Diodora. Sarag was out since his situation suggested that there was no way he would betray devil kind. That left Sakura and the newly instated Zephyr as suspects. Zephyr's attitude told Issei all he needed to know about him. And it was a lucky break that he was going after Sakura so he could kill two birds with one stone. He got his answers about both youth devils and then whispered to Sakura, so he had another ally. The kiss was so Riaz and Valerie think about why he whispered anything to her. Issei, Valerie mumbled to his amusement. Then again, he also did want to have sex with Valerie. The girl was smoking hot and the only issue they really had was LaFay, and with that resolve they were free to do as they wished, and that's exactly what they did. As much as you hate politics. Your scheming is very reminiscent of one. Drake noted. Get some rest, Drake. The fun is just beginning. Issei smiled. With the youth devils meeting over, it meant a return to Kuoh, and the upcoming months were going to be extremely interesting. Once again, the title says it all. Gremory apartment complex. The sun shone inside the apartment of one Ingvild Leviathan as she prepared for her first day at Kuoh Academy. A week ago, the Gremory group along with Valerie and her peerage returned home to Kuoh with the end of the youth devil meeting. Fortunately for Ingvild, Riaz owned an apartment complex and she was given a room right next to Riaz's Queen Akeno, so if she needed anything, she always had someone willing to help her. It was a classic apartment consisting of a small living room with a large leather couch and a few leather chairs, along with a wooden table, a kitchen that was fully stocked and bathroom with a shower-bath combo. Ingvild's bedroom was relatively bare for the moment, consisting of a simple twin bed with sea blue bedsheets, a desk area, a blue dresser for her unmentionables and a closet for her new clothes. After moving her into the apartment, Riaz spared no expense in taking the girl on a massive shopping spree, so she had stuff to wear outside of class when she wasn't caught up in school, which she would be enrolling in soon. Here we go, Ingvild muttered as she got out of her bed and made her way to get showered. Around 20 minutes later she was showered and dressed in the Kuoh uniform and ready to go. Opening her door, she was glad that Riaz's Queen Akeno was waiting for her so she could prepare for her first day of school. Yufufufu, are you ready? Akeno wondered with her usual smile. I guess, Ingvild said timidly since she didn't quite know what to prepare for. Well, the good news is that we've put you in Issei's class, so you'll be next to him all the time. How you manage the rest is up to you. Akeno smiled. Right, Ingvild nodded. She knew Issei was popular thanks to the conversation she had with the others, but she was determined to make her mark. Issei Hyoudou sat in his classroom with nervous anticipation for what was to come. He hadn't visited with the Kendo club in the week he's been back, and Riaz was busy helping Ingvild prepare to move into modern society. Carlaman, Yumi, Arena and Zenobia did a fine job taking care of him, but the ban was over today and he was ready for the kendo club to go crazy. He was a bit curious about Ingvild and where Riaz would ultimately put her, but he trusted the Grimoire heiress to take care of business. Luckily for him, Murayama and Caddis hadn't gotten to school yet, so he had time to prepare himself. Then the classroom door opened and all his calm went out the window. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." Issei groaned before smacking his head against the desk. "Hello class, it's nice to meet you. My name is Azazel and I'll be taking over as your homeroom teacher." The fallen angel leader smiled. His relaxed kimono was replaced with a black suit with white t-shirt and black dress shoes, but it was the fact he was their new teacher that shocked him. Issei hadn't heard much from him since his return, and now he knew why. "Issei, did you know about this?" Arena whispered from next to him. "No, I didn't," Issei grimaced, since this would change everything. Murayama walked in a moment later and without noticing the teacher walked over to Issei. "Hey there stranger, I missed you." Murayama smiled before straddling Issei's waist and smashing her lips against his. Issei went with the flow and Azazel watched with amusement at the antics displayed. "My turn." Murikata smiled, having walked in during the display and eyeing Issei himself. Fine. Murayama smiled before getting up and as she walked back towards her spot, Murayama froze upon seeing their new teacher. "Now where was I?" Kata smiled, having straddled Issei herself, but this time Azazel spoke up. "I would hope going to your desk so we can start homeroom. This is quite the first impression I'm getting of this class." Azazel smiled. "Sorry sensei," Kata said with a blush as she quickly got off Issei and walked to her desk. The old teacher let them get away with it, so she never really thought about it, but clearly this one wouldn't. After all, her parents were still a factor for her, and if they discovered a relationship with Issei, it would be a disaster for everyone. Her aunt didn't say anything so she was alright, but her actual parents could be a problem. Azazel smiled at the reaction and decided to add to the fun with his next announcement. "Now that everyone is here, it's time to announce another surprise. I'm not the only one joining our classroom today." Azazel smiled as Ingvild walked into the room to the joy of most of the class. "Hello everyone, my name is Ingvild Fidi and I'll be joining your class today. I just moved here from Greece and it's an honor to be here." Ingvild smiled before bowing. "Well, Miss Fidi, please take your seat at the back of the class next to Ms. Kirishima." Azazel smiled and Ingvild nodded before doing just that. "I wonder if she knows Hyoudou too." One guy muttered. "Maybe we have a chance for once." Another guy whispered. "Poor girl, Hyoudu's going to come after her soon." A girl muttered. As she sat down next to Murayama, she smiled at the thought of Issei, eventually making her move on him and adding her to his growing collection. However, she had to keep those thoughts to herself for now. "Here we go," Ingvild thought to herself as she prepared for her first day of school. A rare sight appeared during gym class, with Issei deciding to participate in the activity of the day, which in this case was a soccer game. Guys and girls alike from classes 2A and 2D watched as Issei Hyoudou stood at the center circle, acting as striker for his team, since everybody figured it would be the best role for him. "Incredible, he's actually gonna participate," one of the kids said in shock. "What's going on?" Ingvild said nervously, seeing everybody watching the soccer field during gym class. "What's happening is Issei is actually participating for once." Murayama smiled as she walked next to a nervous Ingvild. "For once?" Ingvild said curiously. "Yeah, typically Issei relaxes and nods off during gym class. His nickname of the Hidden Dragon is amusingly appropriate. It looks like he's woken up and ready to stretch his wings." Murayama chuckled. "Now Murayama, don't go corrupting the new girl already." Irina smirked as she walked over to him. Murayama looked at Irina with an odd expression, but smiled. "Hey, it's not my fault, Irina. I haven't seen my manager for a month. Still, I can't believe he's actually going to play." "Manager?" Ingvild said curiously. "Yeah, I'm part of the kendo club and Issei is our manager. It's really fun having him around." Murayama smiled as though it wasn't a big deal. "That's enough, Muri. You should watch what you're about to see. Unlike you guys, I've seen Issei play sports, and if he's got the talent he had as a kid, this should be fun." Irina smiled, causing Ingvild to focus on the field. Sure enough, when the match started, Issei displayed the speed and agility that made him a powerhouse on the battlefield, but it was clear that he was holding back. "Issei hasn't lost his touch at all." Irina smiled warmly as if recalling something from years ago. Both girls said in shock. "As long as I've known Issei, he's been incredible at sports, and clearly that hasn't changed." Irina smiled. "Go Issei." Murayama shouted as Issei turned towards them and waved. "Incredible," Ingvild gasped as she watched Issei go. There was nothing anybody could do as Issei moved, and she knew it. This was the Red Dragon Emperor at his most wonderful, and as the day continued, all Ingvild wondered was when he would turn that fire that he possessed towards her. She noticed the girls next to her cheer along with a pink-haired girl in her class named Caddis, as well as a brown-haired girl from a different class. The cheers only got louder when Issei scored the first of his 3 goals in the game. When the whistle blew to end the game, Issei's team had won 8-2, with Issei scoring 5 goals and picking up 2 assists. Should we go greet him? Irina smiled as she started to walk over. Afraid not, Murayama frowned as Ryoko walked over. It was a rare chance for Ryoko, and clearly, she was intent on taking it. Maybe next time. Irina shrugged as Ryoko wrapped a towel around Issei's neck and he replied by pulling her into a kiss, to the disbelief of Ingvild and nonchalance of Irina and Murayama. She'll pay for that later, Murayama grunted in annoyance, but it was a spectacular display for all to watch regardless. But the end of the day over, it was time for everybody to go home, and naturally Ingvild got attention as the new girl. Hey Ingvild, do you have a club you want to join? One of the girls in the class asked calmly. Ingvild froze for a minute, unsure of how to answer the question. She was obviously going to join the orc, but the question of how to tell the others that wasn't something she was sure of. I heard rumors about an occult research club in the school. Being from Greece, it sounds like the type of thing I'd enjoy, Ingvild replied. I see. Well, if you want to join the club, you should ask Irina over there. The girl replied, and Ingvild went to do so. Irina naturally said she'd take her over to meet the president, and the two made their way towards the orc. As they left, Ingvild couldn't help but look at Issei as Murayama and Cadis walked over to him. I've got some stuff to do before I come over, so make sure the girls know that there's important business to handle today. Once I get there, Issei instructed. So no orgy, Cadis pouted. No orgy, Issei replied flatly. See you soon, manager. Murayama smiled before leaving with her best friend. Finally, Issei and Azazel were alone and it was time to chat. I can't tell if I pity you or envy you, kid. You have an entire club as a harem, and if you go to the orc you have lovers galore there also. Azazel smirked. I'm aware, but on a separate note, care to tell me why Ingvild is in my class instead of with Ria, Sona, Keno and Valerie? Azazel's near-perpetual smile turned into a frown. Kid, to be honest, there's still something incredibly odd about Ingvild, and even you can't deny it. She's been asleep for 1,000 years and you're telling me nobody knew about her. In the supernatural world that's a practical impossibility. Having her around you is better for all parties. Issei frowned since Azazel was right. Fine, but I doubt she'll be too thrilled when I introduce the kendo club to everyone like I'm planning to. Issei frowned. There was very little chance she'd think well of that, even if she suspected as much. Yeah, but you have to do it. Still, you're gonna give it a few days before you do. Azazel reminded him. Yeah, and when that happens, we'll see how things play out. Issei frowned. While Issei dealt with the kendo club, Ingvild sat in the clubroom with Riaz and Valerie. She didn't have any contract so she could sit and talk, whereas Issei, Ingvild asked calmly. He's over at the kendo club. Admittedly, he only comes here if we really need him or to fool around with Yumi and Karlam, and Valerie smirked, causing Ingvild's expression to sour. I see. So maybe he's not interested in me at all. Ingvild sighed. Oh, but that's the thing. He is interested in you, but he's waiting for the right moment, Valerie replied. Arace and Ingvild both stared in shock. Issei is a master manipulator, and he's waiting for the right moment to truly claim you, just like he did with Riaz and me. Valerie smiled. What's that supposed to mean? Riaz huffed. He manipulated you into thinking that the only way he would help you is if he got something in return, to the point you practically pimped out both of your knights to him to keep him appeased. He's the manager of a kendo club full of girls, and he spends most of his time there having sex, but nothing is done about it because Sona can't risk annoying him. He's known about my feelings for a while but never addressed them. Sure, we finally fucked the other day, but it was because Drake and Albion basically forced his hand. He desires you, Ingvild, but he wants to wait until you desire him before he devours you. You make Issei sound like some devious monster, Valerie. Akeno chuckled. Maybe so, but he has reasons for everything. Valerie smiled. So why did he kiss Ikvera? Riaz questioned, pointing out his antics during the old Mau faction. I don't know, but what I do know is this. If you want to pursue Issei, do so. Just remember that once you give in, it's over. Valerie smiled. That's the thing, I don't know what I'm feeling. I slept alone for a long time, and admittedly I went to Issei for comfort because he was available. What would have happened if he wasn't interrupted that night? Ingvild said, frantically trying to figure out what was wrong with her. I don't know, but I know this. If you offer yourself to Issei, he will accept it. But make sure you're doing it because you want to, not because he wants you to. That's the best way to see how he feels. Valerie smiled. I see, Ingvild replied. It was clear that she needed to confront Issei herself. Nightfall arrived and Ingvild Leviathan decided that instead of waiting for an opening, she was going to make one herself. Gathering herself, she used her magic to appear in Issei's room, hoping that the young man was alone and that they could have a chat. Unfortunately for her, Issei wasn't there at all. This was absolutely the right house since Issei's scent was all around, but the red dragon was gone. Maybe he's out again, Ingvild said, solemnly recalling that he left a few times for some reason during the one night she spent with him. As she walked towards the bed, Issei's scent intensified, and she couldn't help but crawl onto the bed and lie down. Issei's scent surrounded her, and in a haze Ingvild reached for her breast with her right hand to calm down the inferno that was building inside her. Issei. Ingvild moaned out as she began rubbing her breasts, imagining that it was him doing so. The thought of Issei claiming her at last was too much, and Ingvild knew it. There was something about Issei that she couldn't handle. Something that made her want to scream his name, and it was a feeling that had grown day by day. Issei. Issei. Ingvild moaned louder and louder, and while her breasts had been freed from their confines, her lower half was aching to receive its own reward. Using her free hand, she snuck towards her lower half ready to add it to the fray, a feat made easier by the fact she had no panties on. She was so distracted that she didn't notice the magic circle appear in the room. Just as her fingers were about to enter her snatch, Issei Hyoudou appeared with Murayama next to him. The pair quickly noticed Ingvild, and both had looks of amusement on their faces. "You work fast, Issei." Murayama smirked, causing Ingvild to look up from her haze. She was absolutely mortified to see that Issei was standing in front of her with one of her classmates in his arms. Issei twitched heavily at the normally erotic sight, since a very awkward conversation was coming soon. As for Ingvild, a massive blush appeared on her face before she fainted from shock. "Don't say a word," Issei groaned. As the orc gathered for another meeting, various members of the club were caught up in odd emotions. For Riaz, it was the fact that Issei was introducing the kendo club to everyone. Granted, she knew that they were aware of the supernatural, but putting a name to a face was a whole different game. For Ingvild, her thoughts were on the night before and the fact that Issei had seen her masturbating to him and the question of what would happen if Murayama wasn't there. Then there was the knowledge that Issei was bringing the entirety of the kendo club over to introduce them to the supernatural beings in the school, since the council were already well known. Then there was a slightly nervous Yumi who knew that the club would have plenty of questions for her also. As Irina walked into the clubroom, at last everyone mentally prepared themselves. Soon came Zenobia and then Issei, and finally, the girls' kendo club. So this is the infamous orc. Not bad, Riaz. Harina smirked, causing Riaz to twitch since she really didn't like the captain of the club. Thanks, Riaz's sweat dropped. Hey look, it's Gasper and even Kaneko. Karina smiled as she walked in. Kaneko was also in Karina's class, and that meant she had a familiar face. Let's not forget Yumi, Clarissa teased. Didn't expect the new teacher to be here also. Kata smiled. That's enough, girls. You're here as guests, remember that. Issei scolded. Right. The girls announced at once, causing Riaz to look in shock at how uniform they were. As you all already know, the orc is a front for the supernatural, and Riaz here is the leader of the group and a high-class devil. Azazel-sensei has his own role, but you don't need to worry about that, Issei revealed. Telling the girls that their new teacher was the leader of the fallen angels would be a bit much. What do you mean, high-class devil? Ryoko wondered. Riaz calmly took over. There are 72 major families of devils, and most pure high-class devils are from those families. Low-class devils are primarily for peerage members. Middle-class devils are typically pure devils from outside of the major families and servants who have risen in rank. So where does everyone rank? Murayama wondered. Riaz, Valerie and Ingvild here are high-class devils. Akeno, Yumi, Asia, Kaneko and Gasper are low-class. Carloman is middle-class, at least I think so. Azazel explained. For Murayama and Kadis, it was certainly strange to see their new teacher in the classroom. It just added to the messy situation. That's right. I was made mid-class a year ago, back when I was with my previous master. Carloman confirmed. What about Issei, Irina and Zenobia, and for that matter our new teacher? Kadis asked calmly. Actually, Irina, Zenobia and I aren't devils. We're humans with supernatural powers. Irina and Zenobia were exorcists, but due to circumstances that were beyond their control, they were kicked out of the church. They decided to ultimately stay at Kuoh. Issei explained. I see, Kata said with narrowed eyes. Any more questions before we go? Ria said calmly. Mind if I ask one? Another member said calmly. Sure. Yui, the girl replied. Yui was a second year that was in a different class from Ryoko and the main group. She was medium height with short brown hair and black eyes. Like the other members, she had an athletic frame and her breasts were low B cups. What is it, Yui? Riaz wondered. Is the student council also connected to the supernatural also? Because the way all of you transferred in and how easily you're able to get connected wouldn't be possible otherwise. Yui explained. That's right, Riaz admitted. That explains why it was so easy for us to get Issei approved and why our bus is what it is. Ryoko chuckled. What do you mean? Riaz wondered. Our bus is basically a limo with a bunch of Levesiates, so Issei can play with us on the way to matches, Kadis explained, causing Riaz to blush. Yufufufu, how much time do you girls spend actually doing kendo? It sounds like you guys have as much fun with Issei as we do. Akeno smiled. As much as you do? Kadis asked curiously. Well, you obviously know he sleeps with Irina, Zenobia and Yumi. He slept with Carloman, Riaz and Valerie also. Akeno smirked. The girls weren't surprised by that, but one of them noticed an odd omission. Hold on, you mean he hasn't slept with you? Murayama said in disbelief. No, he hasn't. He was perfectly okay with Yumi and Carloman, and I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. Though I suppose now I wouldn't say no if he tried. Akeno chuckled. Akeno, that's enough. Rias blushed since things were getting totally out of hand. At any rate. You've had your introduction, so let's get back to the club room and start training. Rias has her duties to attend to and I doubt she wants to have us hounding her. Issei instructed. It was becoming a pain that he didn't particularly want to deal with. Fine, the girls replied as everyone slowly moved out. For Rias it was a relief to see everyone gone, and her peerage was in a similar view, particularly Ingvild, who was stunned to see the new competition. Irina and Zenobia did stay behind though, since they knew their role was done. Once they were gone, the door was shut and Rias let out a deep breath. Finally, they're gone. Rias groaned. If you and Haruna never have gotten along. Akeno chuckled. Regardless, does anybody else want to talk about the elephant in the room? Valerie smiled, causing everyone to focus on her instead of Ria's odd relationship with Haruna. There's quite a few of those, Valerie. So which one were you thinking about? Rias frowned. Issei introducing the kendo club brought up plenty of issues for them, and they knew it. The fact that Issei told them about the supernatural but didn't make them demi-dragons like Irina and Zenobia. Those necklaces they were wearing have traces of magic, so Issei can get to them, but why not make them dragons instead? Valerie explained. That should be obvious, really. Irina smiled. Enlighten me, Valerie smirked. The only people in this room who couldn't slaughter all 10 of them on their own are Gasper and Asia due to them not being fighters. What Issei does enhances your base stats, but not anywhere near as much as you think. The dragon piece wouldn't change the math very much, so it wouldn't be worth it. Rias was stunned that the change was that minimal, so there would be no point then. That's right. Those girls are good for taking the edge off Issei, but that's it. Irina said bluntly. Well, that settles that. It's time for training, I guess. Rias sighed, knowing that she couldn't do anything. As for Ingvild, she was still unsure of what to do. The next day Ingvild walked into the classroom just to find Issei engaging in his pre-class tradition of making out with one of his girls. Really, girls? I thought sensei said not to do that. Ingvild exclaimed. Murayama looked at the girl and smiled before hopping off Issei's lap. Oh, if you're jealous, Ingvild, why don't you give it a shot? Murayama smiled, causing Ingvild to blush, since Murayama had seen her masturbate on his bed. Ingvild stammered as she considered it, and the class took note. Come on, not another one. A male classmate pouted. We might as well bring back the perverted trio. At least they only talked about doing dirty stuff, a girl complained. Various moans and groans showed that the class was tired of the PDA that Issei got every day, but soon everyone looked to them. Gathering herself, she walked towards Issei to the annoyance of the class. As she arrived at his desk, she saw Issei sitting down and walked over to him. Is it okay? Ingvild wondered. If Issei said he could, she would sit on his lap and kiss her like the others. If you want to, Ingvild, I'm okay with it, but don't feel like you have to. Issei said with a smile. Azazel could be there any minute, and Ingvild knew she had to make a move, and fast. The class watched as Ingvild moved to straddle Issei's waist and sit on his lap. Please, Issei, Ingvild pleaded as she looked at Issei with lust in her eyes. Of course, Issei smiled before leaning in to kiss Ingvild. As the pair clashed lips, Ingvild knew that this was just the beginning. Nightfall arrived and Issei was relaxing in his bed until his phone rang. When he saw the unfamiliar number, he answered anyway out of pure curiosity. Hello, this is Issei Hyoudou. Issei said sarcastically. You're a hard man to get a hold of, Issei Hyoudou, a female voice said over the phone. Issei smiled since his other plan began to bore fruit. Why, hello, Lady Agares. I'm curious how you got a hold of me. Issei smiled. Ever since he told her about Diodora, he figured it was only a matter of time until the Agares heiress got a hold of him. Admittedly, it was sooner than he thought, but he would enjoy the conversation regardless. It took a little research, but I discovered you were based in Kuoh like Sona and Rias. All it took was a call to Sona, and she gave me your information. Sakura admitted. Mentally, Issei groaned since Sona would surely give him grief for it later. So what do you want to know? Issei smiled. Why did you tell me not to trust Diodora Astareth? As you know, I'm his opponent for the next battle. Is there something I should look out for? Sakura replied in a much more serious tone. Diodora is heavily suspected of being a traitor for the Chaos Brigade. Because of that, I wanted to see if any of the other youth devils might be traitors as well. Serig's situation meant he was out, and that left Zephyrdor and you. I whispered that because if you were a traitor, Diodora would send somebody to deal with me. Seeing that he hasn't, you're in the clear. Issei replied. I see, Sakura said in a clearly disappointed tone. To be thought of as a traitor couldn't have been good. What about Zephyrdor? I'd be amazed if he isn't a traitor. Fortunately, we'll know soon enough. Issei smiled. Thank you for your honesty. Sakura replied. Of course. Well, I must get going, we humans need our sleep. Issei smiled before hanging up. Moments later, a magic circle appeared in his room, and Ingvild Leviathan popped out wearing the blue nightgown that was made for her by Graphia. Why, good evening, milliseconds, Leviathan. What can I do for you? Issei said sarcastically. Ingvild walked over to Issei's bed with the confidence she had gained from their makeout session earlier. "You know exactly why I'm here, and I hope there won't be any interruptions this time," Ingvild said in a surprisingly confident tone. Issei smiled before getting up. "I believe we're a bit overdressed for what you have in mind." Issei smiled before pulling off his shirt. Ingvild smiled before reaching for the gown and pulling it off, revealing her incredible naked body. "Is this better?" Ingvild smiled, knowing she couldn't be bashful if she wanted to stake her claim. "It's perfect," Issei smiled as he walked over to the Leviathan heiress, ready to add yet another one to his collection. It truly was good to be him. On the eve on one of the biggest events in her life, Valerie Lucifer couldn't sleep. While she spent most of her time at Azazel's during the day, Valerie had her own apartment in a complex on the opposite side of town from the one used by Riaz and the student council. Her apartment was pretty basic, with a simple kitchen stocked with everything she'd need, a living room that wasn't very decorative but was nicely furnished with a large couch, decent-sized television and a few chairs for when her peerage was over, a dining room that served its purpose, along with a bedroom that had very little outside of a closet desk drawer and a twin bed. Her bathroom had a shower-bath combo which was nice, but again it was simple. Tomorrow's the big day. Valerie smiled bitterly as she sat in her living room playing video games, talking with video game rival and fellow dragon Issei Hyoudou over the headset she was wearing. Although they had sex during the trip to the underworld, she didn't know if she could consider herself one of Issei's lovers yet. Issei was infuriating like that. "Yep, and I'm surprised you're not getting some rest, Valerie. This will be your first rating game, and I'm sure everyone else is resting." Issei spoke from the other side. Video games were always her favorite way to relax, and Issei made for an excellent partner in gaming. It was how their bond began and she liked it that way. "Well, that's them. I'll get some rest when I'm good and ready." Valerie huffed. "What's the matter? Zephyr is a weakling and you should easily be able to crush him," Issei reminded her. "I know that, but here's the thing. Before she came to Kuoh, Riaz was good friends with the previous heiress of the Glacial Ebola's clan, Megumi. She happens to be pretty strong, and Riaz is suspicious of how she lost to her cousin despite that," Valerie revealed. "You'll be fine, and if you're still worried, how about I help you relax?" Issei replied. "Unless you're coming over and fucking me, I suggest you save the teasing for Smash Brothers. That style of yours is so irritating." Valerie huffed. Issei loved to play a counter-attack style in the game, and for Valerie, who was naturally aggressive, it was infuriating. "Good night, Valerie," Issei smiled before hanging up their communication and going offline. "That asshole," Valerie huffed as she ripped off her headset in anger before turning off the game. Just as she finished putting the games away, a magic circle appeared in the middle of the room, and a smiling Issei appeared with a white t-shirt and shorts to her shock. "I was going to give you a kiss for good luck before your match tomorrow, but I get the feeling this would work so much better." Issei smiled. "You think I can't tell you're a clone?" Valerie deadpanned. Issei's clones had a unique scent that was different from the real world, and Valerie could easily tell them apart. "In that case, I guess I'll go back home." Issei smiled just for Valerie to grab his hand. "The bed is this way, asshole." Valerie huffed as she dragged Issei up to her room with him barely resisting. As the pair lied in bed with Valerie snuggled against the clone Issei's chest, the red dragon decided to ask a question that had been bothering him leading up to the match. "Hey Valerie, what are you going to do about Kuroka?" Issei wondered. "What do you mean?" Valerie replied as though it wasn't a big deal. "Kuroka was a stray devil, and as much as she trusts you, I doubt she wants to be a devil again." Clone Issei replied. For her to compete in the rating game tournament, they would have to be devils theoretically, and that would be an issue for Kuroka. "It's fine because she's not a devil. In fact, none of my peerage are," Valerie revealed to Issei's shock. Again?" Issei blinked. "I heard from Riaz about what you did with those two exorcist girls and asked Ajuka if he could do something similar for me. Instead of using my power as a catalyst for the evil pieces, they used their own power, and Ajuka manipulated the system into recognizing them as devils." Valerie smirked. "Nice clone," Issei smiled happily. "Now things could work out." "Yeah, and that means I'm ready for my debut, and thanks to a certain red dragon, I'm all relaxed." Valerie smiled before leaning in for another kiss, which Issei gladly accepted. "Well, I can't wait to see what Lady White does in her debut." Clone Issei smiled. "Thanks." Valerie smiled before pecking the clone on the cheek once more. Any nerves she may have had were gone thanks to Issei, and now she could fight with confidence. She would worry about Zephyr later. Issei, Rina and Zenobia sat in the Orc alongside the Grimmery peerage as they prepared to watch Valerie's debut battle. Issei himself was on the couch with Irina and Ingvild next to him, taking his left and right sides respectfully, while Zenobia was on the opposite couch in between Kaneko and Carloman. The Nekomata had her head on the brunette's lap in a way not so different from what Valerie would do. "Hey Issei, how strong is Valerie?" Zenobia wondered. She didn't spend much time watching Valerie, so she had no idea how strong the White Dragon Empress really was. "Strong enough that I don't think I could oppose her in a fair fight." Wait a minute, what about the other day? Didn't you beat her then? Riaz wondered. Issei mentally cursed since that was true, I got a lucky shot in. Issei replied, which was a half-truth. Valerie held back because she realized the curse wasn't affecting him at all and played along. If she really believed the curse was working, she'd have knocked him out in seconds, which would have defeated the purpose of the whole thing. I see, Riaz said with narrowed eyes. Well, let's focus on the match. Irina smiled happily, wanting to put the focus back on Valerie as the group turned towards the battlefield. Valerie smiled as she relaxed inside the throne room of the large castle that acted as her base. Zephyr's base was another castle that was about 5 km away with a large open area in between. So are you guys ready for our big debut? Valerie smiled as she sat on a makeshift throne in an ornate chair with white covers. In fact, the whole room was dyed in the white and light blue that represented her dragon. A touch she was certain Azazel had a hand in. Yes, but the question is how many of us should go. Zephyr is no match for us, and we know it, Arthur smiled, dressed in his suit with his trusted blade by his side. Yeah. Honestly, me and Arthur could kick his ass alone. Bhikkhu chuckled, dressed in Chinese armor with a red bow staff by his side. I wouldn't mind fighting also, but Monkey Boy is right. Kuroka smirked, dressed in her famous black hobi. Valerie contemplated what to do, and in truth she was right. Alright. Bhikkhu Arthur go crazy and makes a perter squirm. What about us, Valerie? LeFay wondered, dressed in her mage's outfit. We can sit and wait until Bhikkhu and the others have had their fun, and then I'll come in to finish it off. Valerie smirked. She was going to make it flashy and beautiful. Bhikkhu and Arthur nodded before the pair made their way out. Orc. That'll begin, the announcer roared, and the group watched as Bhikkhu and Arthur made their way towards Zephyr's base. I don't get it. She's only sending those two for the whole base. Riaz said in disbelief. Yes, because those two are more than enough to beat Zephyr. To be honest, if you added Kuroka, Valerie wouldn't need to do a thing, Issei said snidely, causing Riaz to twitch. We'll see, Riaz said calmly, and they watched the battle. Just as Issei expected, Bhikkhu and Arthur made quick work of most of Zephyr's peerage, with Arthur taking out the 8 hobgoblins that were his pawns in mere minutes. His rooks consisted of a pair of rock golems, and Bhikkhu took care of them with Senjutsu-boosted punches. His knights were a pair of flying griffins, and with very little effort Arthur and Bhikkhu finished those as well. Told you, Issei smirked as Riaz watched in shock. But how? Riaz exclaimed. She watched them train and they never showed this level of power. Valerie was always strong, and while they were intense with you guys, they weren't serious. Issei explained, causing Riaz to frown. And yet you beat them so easily. Riaz thought to herself. If they were this all-powerful group and yet Issei was able to defeat them, it was a terrifying thought. Focusing back on the fight, Zephyr was pissed at the way things had played out. This is bullshit. I shouldn't be losing to that fake devil bitch. Why don't you wait for a little bit and that bitch will join the party? Then again, it doesn't really matter since you lost to a flick from a base form Red Dragon Emperor. You're no match for Lady Valerie. Bhikkhu smiled. What's that supposed to mean? Zephyr cursed. That's enough, Bhikkhu. I'll finish him as he requested. Valerie shouted from the sky with her balance breaker out. She landed about 10 feet in front of Zephyr. Oh, what I wanted to toy with him for a bit. Bhikkhu smiled before backing away. Now Bhikkhu. Zephyr had an issue with Lady Valerie, and it's only right that she be the one to finish him off. It's why I used ruler on his queen. Arthur smirked before nodding towards the large mammoth in the corner. The beast was stabbed by Arthur's Excalibur ruler, but ordered to stay put by Arthur instead of simply finishing the job. Right, Bhikkhu chuckled. You bastards, Zephyr growled before launching a magic attack at Valerie. Boring Valerie deadpanned before using a magic circle to easily block the attack. What the fuck? Zephyr exclaimed. Tell you what. I'll give you 10 minutes to try and force me to divide anything with my balance breaker. If you fail to do so in the 10 minutes, I'll end the battle, but if you do, I'll give you the win. Valerie smirked. Deal. Zephyr smirked and he charged Valerie again. The 10 minutes that followed were an utter joke as Zephyr shot various magic attacks at Valerie just for her to block them with ease. Orc. Incredible, Riaz gasped as she watched the White Dragon Empress go. On sheer power alone she was dominating Zephyr. She's just toying with him. Issei smirked, appreciating the sadism. Not bad. Your rival is doing pretty well, Drake smirked as Valerie blocked another series of attacks. Yep, and Valerie's hardly trying. It's nice to see her be this strong. Issei smirked. Valerie was truly too powerful for Zephyr, and as the 10-minute mark arrived, Valerie smirked as Zephyr fell to a knee in exhaustion. It's over now, Zephyr. Your 10 minutes are up. Valerie smiled as she walked towards the winded Zephyr. One dragon shot later and that was it. What a battle, Riaz smiled happily. Yeah, and that's my cue. Issei smiled bitterly as he got up to leave. Why not stay, Issei? I'm sure Valerie would want you to be here. Riaz said happily. I'm sure she would also, but that curse would ruin any celebration. Issei replied since he needed to keep up his story. Later that night most of the group gathered at Azazel's to celebrate Valerie's victory. Riaz and her peerage, Valerie and her peerage, and finally Irina and Zenobia all gathered to celebrate Valerie's victory, with Muriama Caddis and Issei being the notable exceptions. The Valerie Lucifer and her debut victory, Azazel smiled, having given champagne to the older members of the group with Kaneko and Asia, choosing juice instead. You did wonderfully, Valerie. Riaz smiled happily as she drank some wine alongside her newest ally. Yeah, you were really strong. Ingvild smiled. Tell me about it. Issei always said you were strong and you proved it. Irina smiled. Thanks guys. I'm glad all of you could be here for me. Valerie smiled. Well, you deserve it. I'm so proud of you. Azazel smiled happily. Valerie was like his daughter and seeing her this happy was a beautiful thing for him. Thanks Oz. Valerie smiled. As the night continued, the group was all smiles, but Valerie herself couldn't help but feel a little bitter. Everything okay? Valerie Albion spoke up. Yeah, I'm just mad Issei couldn't make it. I mean, if he showed up, LeFay could have just transformed into something else. Valerie replied mentally. Well, he's not here. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Albion replied. Hey Valerie, we're about to order some more pizza. You good? Biku shouted, breaking Valerie from her inner thoughts. Yeah, I'm fine. Valerie replied, but her inner thoughts were on what her fellow dragon was doing. Hi to household. While Valerie and the group were having their celebration, Issei was relaxing at home by himself. I can't tell if I should be happy or annoyed. Issei smirked as he sat alone. Irina and Zenobia had gone to celebrate with Valerie, but he couldn't come. Well, he could, but he figured LeFay would be more comfortable that way. Relax, partner. It's not as though you didn't know this would happen. Drake chuckled. Yeah, Issei replied with a smile. Valerie wanted to celebrate and he was going to let her do so in peace. Worrying about something happening with the curse just wasn't smart. Then again, something about that whole thing bothered me. That man was far too weak to have defeated anybody. Drake muttered. Yep, which means his counterattack should be coming soon. Issei smiled as he got up from his bed and went to get his tracksuit on. Azazel's home. After a few hours of fun, the party seemed to come to an end. I'm going to go pass out now. Don't have too much fun without me. Azazel smiled before walking to his room. Took him long enough. Valerie smiled before her expression turned sour and she looked outside. For the last hour somebody had been watching them but didn't attack. It was cowardly as far as she was concerned, but it didn't surprise her given the source. So is our party crasher finally going to come say hi? Riaz smiled. She got her answer when the door was blasted open. Sorry I'm late, I got stuck in traffic. Zephyr Glaciolabola spoke up with a wicked smile. I see, and it didn't have anything to do with the fact that you're scared shitless of Zaz, not that I blame you. Valerie smiled. Zephyr scowled before focusing on the group. It's a shame that bastard Red Dragon isn't here. Oh well, he's got a nasty surprise waiting for him. What did you do? Valerie scowled. Well, I had a few friends of mine pay his family a visit. They should be coming to say hi right about now. Zephyr smiled, causing the room to scowl. You're a real bastard, Zephyr, but that doesn't matter. You're not escaping this room alive. Valerie roared. That would be a pretty bad idea. If you kill me, my army will use that as a cue to come and attack. That means you're done. Zephyr smiled, causing the group to scowl yet again. You little, Valerie cursed. Of course, I can always call off the attack if you want, but I want you to do something for me. Zephyr cackled. What's that? Valerie scowled, though given his personality she knew what was coming. Become my woman. Do that and I'll spare everyone. Zephyr cackled. You're disgusting, Valerie spat. Why thank you. Devils should be that way after all. This whole piece crap is a joke. Zephyr smirked. Valerie was about to just attack and see what happened next, but a magic circle appeared in the middle of the room and out popped a bored-looking Issei dressed in his tracksuit. Sorry I'm late to the party, but I had to deal with a pest problem. Issei said sarcastically. What the hell? Zephyr scowled, not expecting Issei to show up out of nowhere. Issei smiled as he walked towards Valerie, making sure to stare at LeFay for a bit as he did. I don't get it, Valerie. What kind of victory party is it if you invite the guy whose ass you kicked? Issei teased before pecking Valerie on the lips. Normally, Valerie would have enjoyed the kiss very much, but she was more focused on Zephyr and his actions. Now's not the time for this, Issei. We're in a bit of a bind. Valerie said nervously. Let me guess. Zephyr over here has a bunch of bad guys that are on standby, and he wanted to make Valerie his woman, or he'd unleash them on Kuoh. Issei said calmly before turning his attention towards Zephyr. Despite his calm expression, everyone who knew him realized that he was pissed. How did you know that, and what the fuck are you doing here? Zephyr scowled. Well, I knew because I took care of those house guests you sent me and my family. I convinced one of them to tell me what you were planning before I sent him to his grave. As for why I came here. Well, somebody decided to put his hands on something that belonged to me, and I don't quite like that. Issei scowled as he walked towards Zephyr, his aura rising by the second. We should probably run now. LeFay said nervously, recognizing that Issei's curse was slowly building up. No need to run Lefei because the curse doesn't affect me anymore. Issei smirked, continuing his walk. How? Lefei exclaimed, since that curse was a major problem. Azazel and I knew that if we didn't work out the Lefei issue, it would be impossible to fight against the Kuoh's brigade. So at Ria's home, I intentionally activated the curse by appearing in front of you when you were in your mage outfit and allowed myself to go crazy. During that time Drake was able to analyze the power and control it, which is why things went so well and why everyone was relatively unharmed. What Riaz and the girls saw when they arrived was me manifesting a controlled version of the power. Kinda like I'm doing now. Issei smiled, stopping right in front of the glacial Ebola's heir. Doesn't matter how strong you are. Once I die my army will attack and you can't stop me. Zephyr cackled before Issei punched him right in the gut, causing him to fall to the ground. The smiling Issei stood over the prone glacial Ebola's heir and simply smiled, dragon shot. And blew Zephyr away. Everyone was stunned by the display, but also by the fact that they never figured out how to stop the army. Issei, are you nuts? What about that army? Irina scowled. Oh, that just come outside. Issei smiled as he powered down and walked outside with the others right behind him. When they arrived outside, the group were stunned to discover that there was a massive barrier over the town and above them was a clash. One party was Zephyr's army based on how they were dressed, but it was the other party that shocked them. That's Ikfera. What the heck is she doing here? Ria said in disbelief. Back during the three factions meeting, I had a secret mission from Zaz to see if any of the other heirs were spies for the Kuoh's brigade like Diodora. Issei smiled as the battle raged on above them. Luckily for them, Sikfera was extraordinarily skilled and it was obvious to those watching that she would win. So that's why you got involved instead of Arthur. Valerie gasped, recalling Issei's involvement in that little scuffle. Yup. I wanted to get a good look at Zephyr and Sikfera myself. So what did you discover? Valerie wondered. Up in the sky the battle was quickly coming to an end and Sikfera appeared to be victorious. Neither of them were spies, but Zephyr was a bit of a dick. Luckily for me, I made such an impact on Sikfera that she reached out to me recently. Issei chuckled. Riaz recalled that Issei did kiss her on the cheek during that interaction and couldn't hide her annoyance. Don't tell me you're trying to seduce Sikfera also. No, but when I learned about Zephyr's plans I called Sikfera and asked her to make a barrier for the army while I dealt with Zephyr. She agreed on 2 conditions. The first was that she be the one to fight off the troops that I knew were coming. I was going to do it myself with a few clones, but since she wanted to do so I had no problem. What's the second condition? Valerie wondered. Turns out, Sikfera is a mecha taku and despite her best efforts, has been unable to find the original Mobile Suit Gundam episodes to watch in her spare time. Doing that for her was the second condition. Luckily for me, I know a guy who's a big Gundam fan and can get me the DVDs. Issei smiled, causing the group to sweat drop. I see. Valerie replied, unsure of what else to say. So yeah. Problem solved and it's time for me to go home. We've got class tomorrow and I've got a rare night off. You guys can continue your party if you want, but I don't care. Issei smiled before activating a magic circle and leaving just like that. Well, that was awkward. Biku chuckled. Yep, but that's Issei. Zenobia smiled. Yep. I've got to call my brother and tell him what happened. Riaz groaned, knowing that she had a long night ahead of her. Valerie returned to her apartment and despite having barely done anything was exhausted. Can't my life ever be simple? Valerie cursed as she went over to her bed and collapsed, not bothering to change out of her outfit for the night, a pair of black jeans and a black blouse with no bra. That's the curse that comes with being the White Dragon Empress. Albion chuckled. Yeah, I know, but seriously. I kick his ass in our battle and then Zephyr decides he wants to make me his woman. Like, who does that? I'm beginning to understand why you hate dealing with the devil so much. Issei. Valerie groaned before turning to the side to see a smiling Issei in a white shirt and shorts. Aw, when here I thought I could get a strip show. Issei teased. If you want to see me naked, you're doing it yourself, mister. Valerie retorted before moving her body so she was on her back and Issei had easy access to her. Very well, the clone smiled before flinging off his shirt and crawling onto the bed. His goal was obvious and he wasn't going to be denied. Before we get started, I just have one question. Valerie wondered as the clone effortlessly pulled off the jeans she was wearing, revealing a pair of lacy silver panties. No, I'm not sleeping with Sikfera and I won't be anytime soon. I do need to call my contact tomorrow, but that's a minor annoyance. The clone smirked. That wasn't the question I was going to ask, but that's good to know. Valerie blushed as she leaned up and took off her shirt. So, what did you actually want to know? Issei smiled wolfishly. Were you serious when you said I belonged to you? Valerie blushed both from recalling Issei's words and the heated gaze he was sending her. Does this answer your question? Issei smirked before leaning down and capturing Valerie's lips in a heated kiss that Issei pulled away from after around 30 seconds. Yes, Valerie replied before leaning up to resume their kiss. Issei and a lot more. Her grand debut was a success and now she was firmly among Issei's lovers as she wanted for some time. Things were finally looking up for Valerie Lucifer and she knew it was only going to get better from here. The next day was school and everyone was sitting in the orc besides Issei who was with the kendo club. I guess now it's my turn, Ria said calmly. Valerie and Zephyr was the first matchup but she and Sona were next. Yep, but it won't be much of a match. Valerie chuckled. The power difference between Ria's and Sona was vast and Ria's and Sona knew it. I wouldn't underestimate Sona if I were you, Valerie. She's incredibly smart and that's what makes her dangerous. Ria's admitted. Yeah, but Valerie started to say before a magic circle appeared in the middle of the room. Everyone tensed up briefly, but there was a shock when Sekvera Gares appeared in some casual clothes. What are you doing here, Sekvera? Riaz asked calmly. I came because there's some information I thought you should know, but first bring Sona over here. Sekvera said calmly. What about Issei? Riaz wondered. You can grab him if you wish, but this is primarily devil business. Sekvera said calmly. 10 minutes later Sona appeared with her peerage, but Issei did not. What's going on, Sekvera? Sona wondered. It had been a long time since Sekvera appeared in Kuoh and for her to visit was sure to be trouble. The fact she came by last night was another matter, but Sona blamed that on Issei. It is. I got a call from Megumi this morning and there's urgent news. Somebody attempted to burn down the main house of the Glacial Ebola's family last night and the start of the fire was in Zephyr's room. What? Sona and Riaz exclaimed and even the watching Azazel was shocked. The rest of the house was fine, but Zephyr's room was completely destroyed. I thought I should tell you guys given what happened with him. Sekvera said calmly. I see. I assume that the Mau have been notified. Sona said with a hint of annoyance. Yes, and an investigation will be done very soon. I just thought I'd tell you guys as soon as possible so you know to be careful. Sekvera said calmly. Thanks, Sekvera, we'll be way more careful. Riaz said calmly. This couldn't be good. Good, now if you don't mind, I have to get back to my anime. Please inform the Red Dragon that I want those videos as soon as possible. Sekvera said calmly. Videos? Sona wondered. It's part of an arrangement we had. Sekvera replied calmly, keeping her stoic expression. Very well, Sona replied, unwilling to ask more. Well, goodbye, Sekvera replied before teleporting away. It seems we have quite a bit to discuss. Sona frowned. Yes, we do, Sona, yes, we do. Ria said with a nervous expression on her face. Things were clearly getting interesting and not in the good way. End of the here. So that's it for today's video, guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.